Thank you for tuning into our podcast. We are coming to you from South Hadley, Massachusetts. I'm your host, Carrie, and joining me is Holyoke's very own local historian and creator of the historical tours of Greater Holyoke, Robert Caboon. He offers both public and private tours, as well as presentations of the local canal systems, reservoirs, cemeteries, and churches, as well as various parks, streets, and houses in Holyoke, South Hadley, Chicopee, Granby, and also East Hampton, Amherst, and Hadley. Now, you actually lead these tours and give these presentations yourself, is that correct?
That is correct, and this is part of a big tour.
And today we'll be talking about Holyoke in World War I. So how did World War II, how did World War II affect Holyoke?
Okay, it affected it greatly because 212 men from Holyoke would die during the war, but many men from Holyoke would enter the war. If you were between 18 to 45 years old, you were sure that you were going to be drafted and brought into the war. And even the 15, 16, 17-year-olds knew that through the years their time would come. And that also meant that there wasn't quite enough labor at points because thousands of men that had jobs in Holyoke had to leave Holyoke and go onwards. And they are memorialized around Holyoke, and we'll talk about that. And we'll also talk about some of the men. And we're also going to talk about the way some of these war deaths happen to be honored, because they're honored just beyond this memorial stone that they have. Now, you can imagine that Holyoke would change greatly. This is the biggest war that the world has ever seen. People would have to sacrifice greatly. And so even on the individual level, families would have to sacrifice. They would have to give up. They'd have to have victory gardens, for instance, where small gardens would be planted in the backyard trying to get their own food. There would be metal drives and paper drives. And people would listen constantly on the radio or television to get more news about all the activities of the men. And it was a very tough war on the whole country, the whole world, and certainly on Holyoke, which had lots of people that entered that war. 212 men from Holyoke would die.
And where are the war deaths honored in Holyoke?
They're honored at Veterans Park of Holyoke on the southern edge where Dwight Street is. There is a memorial that's hexagonal. And on 5 of the sides, you have the names of all the men that died during the course of the war. This list is enormous. And even if you don't know Holyoke very well, you can go through it and see and learn. And a lot of these names are very common names to find in the history of Holyoke. In the past, they come from Protestants, Catholics, and Jewish religion. They come from all economic groups. And if you look at them, there's special ones. There are some men with a star by their name, and that means that they not only died during the course of the war from the injuries or illnesses, but that they are Congressional Medal of Honor winners. And these people are also honored with a special Blackstone in Veterans Park for what they did during that war. There are some chaplains with names on there, right? And that would include Protestant, Catholic, and Jewish chaplains.
Okay, so quickly before we continue with the rest of our interview, just to fill our listeners in, if you want to sign up for any of his various tours or find out any more information, you can check out his website at holyokecanaltour.org. And you can email him directly to set up private tours at bobcat4214, capital B, at yahoo.com. And they are great for fun educational outdoor activities for the whole family or for your group parties. So getting back to our interview, tell us about some of these men from Holyoke that lost their lives.
All right, so many men lost their life during the course of the war. One of them was Raymond Bowden. He distracted the Germans, and then he ran. When he did that, he did it by running out into the field where a lot of shots were being fired, and he diverted their attack, and he got some men in this group to move out of the foxholes they're in to another one where it'd be safer. And then he tried it again, and some more of the men were able to move. Then he tried it again, and this time he was shot in the head, and he died. For his great bravery in saving many, many American lives that day, he was awarded the Congressional Medal of Honor. Also, Joseph Muller from Holyoke is another one of the war deaths from that war. And he did a very similar feat, except in the Pacific. And for his courageous acts, he's now a Congressional Medal of Honor winner. And this is along with Mackenzie. So these three are honored on a plaque, additional plaque inside of Veterans Park. There are other men. There's Jewish people, of course. Henry Jerish of Holyoke, of the Sons of Zion Synagogue, who died during the course of the war, during a training mission in the United States. He died in the plane. And his name is on here too. Now, the first two, Raymond Bowden is buried at the Notre Dame Cemetery in South Hadley, Massachusetts, because he was a Catholic that belonged to the Presbyterian Church. Joseph Muller is not buried in the United States. He's buried at the Cemetery of the Pacific in Honolulu, Hawaii. And the Muller Bridge between Holyoke and South Hadley is named after Joseph Muller. Now, there's many other people from Holyoke that died during the course of the war. And, for instance, William Kennedy in Kennedy Park in Holyoke is named after him. And we are all thankful for what these men have done for Holyoke through the years and for their country.
And what are some other ways in which these war deaths are honored?
All right, they're honored also by names of parks and names of schools around Holyoke are named after the war deaths. All right, so for instance, Donahue and Muller and Bowden, as in Bowden Village. They all are with names of fields, and this is a great way of getting their names out there, and people can honor them still to this day by going to these fields and enjoying these many, many fields around Holyoke. So on my webpage, I have a list of all the men that have parks named after them or Medal of Honor winners. And I also have a list and a picture of the 5 stones of the hexagonal memorial stone in Veterans Park, where you can see all the very men that died during the course of this war.
And thank you, Robert, for educating us on tours. And again, we want to thank our listeners for tuning in. And you can tune into a large selection of our other podcasts and much more on his website. Again, it's holyokecanaltour.org. And you can find out information or inquire about any of the private tours at his email, bobcat4214, capital B, at yahoo.com. And make sure to check out his 2024 season tours and more as they become available. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you for tuning in to our podcast. We are coming to you from South Hadley, Massachusetts. I am your host, Carrie, and joining me is Holyoke's very own local historian and creator of the historical tours of Greater Holyoke, Robert Coleman. He offers both public and private tours, as well as presentations of the local canal systems, reservoirs, cemeteries, and churches, as well as various parks and streets in Holyoke, South Hadley, and Chicopee, Mass. Now you actually lead these tours and give these presentations yourself, is that correct?
Yes, and this is the discussion about a particular war.
So today we'll be talking about Holyoke and the Korean War. So where are war deaths from the Korean War honored in Holyoke?
All right, if you go to Veterans Park, towards the northern edge of that park, you'll find one plaque structure, and on there are the 25 names of Holyoke residents who died due to the Korean War, either by illness or injuries. And it's a nice plaque, and it doesn't say much about the men itself, and so you have to read about them somewhere else. And I'll tell you about a few of them and what effect the war had on the Holyoke area and where some of these dead are buried around the area.
So tell us about some of these men.
Okay, Frank Garrity's name is on there. He was helping out in Japan, getting ready armaments on a ship, and he's carrying one armament with a rookie. He's training the rookie how to carry armaments, and sadly, the rookie dropped his end of the armament, and the whole weapon exploded in both their faces. The rookie would die around the spot. Frank Garrity would live a few days and die in a hospital in Japan. And they would bring his body back, and he's buried in Holyoke at St. Jerome's. Now, these stories happen again and again, so it's very sad to read about how some of these men died of illnesses or injuries. There's also James Reynolds, who died in the Korean War. He was a young man of 30 years old, just starting out in life. He also is buried at the St. Jerome Cemetery of Holyoke. His family had his name engraved on the back of that stone. And you can go through the list of all 25 men and come up with sad stories about how young they were. And what was fortunate was that the Korean War came out to a rather decent end. They were able to stop the Chinese and Korean forces halfway down the peninsula and keep South Korea as a country with a lot of democratic values to it.
And quickly, before we continue with the rest of our interview, just to fill our listeners in, if you want to find out more information or sign up for any of his various tours, you can check out his website at holyokecanaltour.org. And there he has both videos of the various stops along each tour and also past and present photos of the historical sites throughout as well. And if you're interested in setting up a private tour, you can email him directly at bobcat4214, capital B, at yahoo.com. And they are perfect for fun and educational outdoor activities for the whole family or for your group parties, especially those special occasions and get-togethers. And they are also good just for getting outdoors for the day. So getting back to our interview, how did the Korean War affect Holyoke?
Well, like you probably can guess, it did not affect it as much as World War II and World War One or Civil War before it. There was no need for great efforts on the part of the citizenry, and we were ready in terms of weapons. It did affect the life of 25 families because 25 men from Holyoke would die during the course of the war. All of them were in their 20s or early 30s. And that always affects it because you're losing people that are in the prime of their life. There are so many stories you can go through, and I've read a few of the obituaries, and it's always the same. Our son of this family died, at this day in Korea, and he had been working at this mill, had gone to this university, and it kind of gets you after a while. You stop reading it because it just takes men in the prime of their life.
And are there war death barriers around Holyoke?
Yes, there's many around Holyoke. So I'm keeping a chart on my internet on my webpage, which shows each of the 25 men, my name and my rank, and then where they died, what year they died, and then what cemetery they're buried in. Like I mentioned, Frank Garrity and James Reynolds are both buried in the St. Jerome Cemetery. I went to visit their graves maybe 10 years ago, and I found both of them. And I wish they were honored in other ways. I don't think any of the men from the Korean War had parks or buildings or streets named after them yet. But maybe with the passage of time, people will come to honor them in that way. There's so much other World War One and World War II deaths that it's easy to find men that were very brave during their lives and served their country valiantly.
So thank you, Robert, for educating us on your tours, and I want to thank our listeners again for tuning in. And if you want to tune into a large selection of our other podcasts and much more, again, you can check out his website, and that's holyokecanaltour.org. And again, you can email him directly for private tours or to inquire about anything else at bobcat4214, capital B, at yahoo.com. And be sure to keep an eye out for his upcoming 2024 season tours and more as they become available. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you for tuning into our podcast, Canal Days. I'm your host, Carrie, and joining me is Holyoke's very own local historian and creator of the historical tours of Greater Holyoke, Robert Como. He offers both public and private tours, as well as presentations of the historical sites within communities throughout Mass. Currently, the communities that he focuses on this year are Holyoke, Chicopee, South Hadley, and East Hampton, also Granby and Amherst as well. His tours focus on the canals, reservoirs, cemeteries, and churches, as well as parks, houses, and streets. He personally gives all of his presentations and tours himself, and in today's episode, we will be discussing Holyoke in the Vietnam War, which is obviously from the community of Holyoke. So, where is there a memorial to the war deaths due to the Vietnam War?
In Holyoke, Massachusetts, they are at Veterans Park, which is bounded by Hamden Street, Custis Street, Maple Street, and they're along the Hamden Street side. There's only 8 men from Holyoke that died during the course of that war due to the illness or injuries caused by that war. And they honor each block separately and have a few quotes about the war. And it's a very nice memorial. It's near the Korean War Memorial on the northern edge of the park, of course. Now, I'm very privileged to know that it's such a beautiful thing. It deserves to be there. They made it so well. Most of the war deaths of Holyoke were in the 1960s, of course. And along the way, we're going to tell you about some of these men, and we're going to explain the war series that we've been going through, both from prior wars and from later wars compared to the Vietnam War. And hopefully you'll get a good sense of what Holyoke has done for its many war deaths and their very brave men.
And tell us about some of these men.
There's 8 men that are honored on these memorial stones. Leonard Castor died in 1964. Stanley Kierzik died in 1965. Robert Bosquet died in 1965. David Owens died in 1966. Ronald Giroux died in 1966. Thomas Seklecki died in 1967. George Lucas died in 1967. Donald Labonte died in 1968. Vincent McMahon died in 1969. And Clayton Hugh died in 2004. He was in the Marine Corps, and he was wheelchair bound his whole life, but he ran around the schools of Holyoke giving speeches and telling about the war. So those are the names of the 8 men, and I'll tell you a little bit about some of them. Robert Bosquet, I was able to find a picture of him and posted them to my website. Now, interestingly, his body was brought back to the United States, and he's buried in South Hadley at the Precious Blood Cemetery. His gravestone is pretty easy to find, has a military style stone to it. He is of ethnic group of Quebec, and he probably grew up in South Holyoke and went to the Precious Blood Church. There's also Ronald Giroux. I was able to find his picture too. His body, of course, was brought back to Holyoke and buried in Forestdale. Now, the other men, I found some pictures, and that's great. And I found some of them where they're buried, but I don't have both. So on those 2 men, I happen to have both their picture and the burial places. And each one of the men's stone, they also give off what they were, if they were in the Army, Marines, so forth. Like Robert Bosquet, I just mentioned, he was in the Marine Corps, and he died August 18th, 1965 in Vietnam. And Ronald Giroux, he was in the Army, and he was a private first class. He died December 28th, 1966. So on each of them, I found as much information as possible. It's not like the other wars where lots of men died, like 212 during World War II. To get all their information would be very hard. But for Civil War, for instance, I was able to do that because I put a lot of effort into that one. Someday I'll get all of them in.
So quickly before we continue with our interview, just to fill our listeners in, for more information or to sign up for any of his various tours, you can check out his website at holyokecanaltour.org. There you can find videos and podcasts of the stops along each tour, as well as photos and text of the historical sites as well. And for private tours and other inquiries, you can email him directly at bobcat4214, His tours make for fun and educational outdoor activities for families and group parties. So getting back to our interview, ending this war series, are there any notes to state about prior wars that you have not mentioned?
All right, there's a couple of wars I haven't mentioned because they don't have memorial plaques or stones around Holyoke, but they deserve to. And these are wars that were before the 1850 founding of Holyoke. This is when Holyoke was called Ireland Parish. It was a precinct of Springfield or West Springfield along the way. The Holyoke started as Ireland Parish around 1720, and from 1720 to 1773, it was a precinct of Springfield. From 1773 to 1850, it was a precinct of West Springfield. All right, so I'd like to mention two wars. The first one is the American Revolutionary War, where two brothers died due to illness or injuries caused from that American Revolutionary War. They have no plaque around Holyoke. They might have one in Springfield or in West Springfield, I don't know. They were from the Day family. Robert Day died at Fort Ticonderoga outside the fort. He was killed by an ambush of the Native Americans in 1777. He was 13 years old. He was bringing food to his brothers who were out fighting in the Troy, New York area, and they ambushed him. Also, his brother Edward Day died in 1777 in Troy, New York. And he was young also. I believe he was 18 or 19 years old. Two other brothers fought during the war but survived, Jedediah and Joel. And their father, I believe his name was Eli, he survived the war. So this family had a lot of hardships, but nowhere in Holyoke are these two brothers honored. And I wish someday that they would honor them, because just because it wasn't Holyoke yet, but it was Ireland Parish, doesn't mean that you should exclude them from memorials along the way. And also, there's another war, the French and Indian War. There was four of those French and Indian Wars. The last one of all was the French and Indian War #4. George Washington happened to fight in that. George Knox did too. And Holyoke had one person die during the course of that war. And he is also not honored at any plaque in Holyoke. I don't know if Springfield did. Holyoke would have been Ireland Parish, which in 1750s when he died was part of Springfield at that time. So I don't know if he's honored. His name was S.L. Chapin, and on the stone it said he died from an attack by the Native Americans in New York, and so he died due to a war. So these three people, I wish they had their separate plaques, and they should be put up, those plaques, into the War Memorial Building in Holyoke. Uh-oh. I just picked it up. They should be honored with a plaque, and that plaque should be in a special room in the War Memorial Building on Appleton Street. Now, one more mention is that the State Armory on Sargent Street, it suffered a lot of damage around its backhand side. It also has floors could not be entered by firemen. It has a double X on it. And I wish they'd take a plaque out of there for the Spanish-American War, which have names of 8 men on it, or maybe 9. And that plaque should be put into the War Memorial Building also, because I don't think the Army building's going to last much longer. I don't want that plaque damaged.
So, now same for any wars after Vietnam?
Okay, since Vietnam, no resident of Holyoke has died due to illness or injuries suffered in a war fought by the United States. That's a lot of wars. It includes the Afghanistan War, of course. It includes the 2 Iraqi wars. It includes entries into Grenada, entries into Panama, and small excursions otherwhere in Somalia and so forth, and might include terrorist acts on the open seas against ships. So no one has died from Holyoke since that time. Very few people have actually died compared to other massive wars. And so since then we don't have any other plaques to put up. And people do keep up with this material. So the veterans group around Massachusetts keep up with this and inform the city in various ways along the way. So this question will be open, and hopefully no one dies from Holyoke or anywhere, but if it does, they'll be ready.
So thank you, Robert, for educating us on your tours and historical topics of your expertise. And thank you to our sponsors. And of course, we want to thank our listeners for tuning in. You can check out a large selection of our other podcasts at his website, as well as on SoundCloud.com. And be sure to stay up to date with new podcasts and videos posted daily. Thank you, and hope you join us again.